The importance of the aviation industry in any country cannot be underestimated. In Nigeria, the industry has been growing slowly but steadily since the pre-colonial days till the present. Almost all the cities with airports in Nigeria are commercial nerve centers, and they contribute immensely to the socio-economic development of the country. However, in keeping up with global trends, several challenges such as safety concerns, high costs of aviation fuel, and high operation costs, inadequate funding and resources, lack of skilled manpower, among others, have adversely affected the sector. Consequently, these challenges constrain the ability of service providers such as airlines, airports, and other essential services in the aviation industry to meet the increasing needs of customers. But if these challenges are addressed, they could significantly unlock the industry's potential for future growth. For this conversation, we now turn to a former managing director of Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, Roland Iyayi, who will be discussing the opportunities and challenges in the Nigerian aviation sector and how to grow the sector more robustly. Good afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Now, we outlined some of the issues that are plaguing the aviation sector. Right. But based on your experience, what would you say is probably a crucial challenges that we might have missed that are very significant?
When you look at the structure of the industry today, it's designed by nature internationally for cost recovery. But over the years, we've had subsequent governments see aviation as an elitist sector, and they've taxed it to the hilt. And as we speak, aviation is taxed the highest in the entire economy. People may not realize this, but as we speak, there are 17 different taxes, fees, and charges applied to every flight undertaken by any airline in the country. But it may not be known to the public. So you find that to a large extent, even though people see this high ticket prices, they assume that the airlines are making a lot of money, but actually the airlines are actually, collectors of government taxes, so to speak. So if the taxes, the fees, and the charges in the sector are reduced substantially, would find more growth. As a matter of fact, people think that, when you tax, you make more money. But that's not correct. When you reduce your taxes, the affordability of industry becomes even more so. Then it allows more people to be able to travel. When more people travel, then government can now earn a lot more than they're earning with the fewer people traveling today. So the economics of it is something that needs to be understood and dealt with to grow the sector substantially.
All right. Now, the tax is one way to look at it. Others are saying that the real issue is corruption. And to quote the Minister of Aviation, the corrupt cartel who are operating in the aviation industry. Now, I believe you've commented on that and you feel that possibly the statements by the minister may demarket the industry as a whole. But let's zero in on corruption in aviation. Can you give us an analysis of what that looks like in your understanding?
First of all, I disagree with the minister. I think his statements were unguarded.
So there's no corrupt cartel?
Again, in every system, you will have the good, the bad, the ugly. What's a quantum? That's what we're talking about. I mean, if I'm going to look at the industry and I'm going to look at where we are today, I would work with data. So right now, we had an ICAO audit in September of 2023. Now, that particular audit took cognizance of 8 different sectors. Amongst them is airworthiness, there's operations, there's licensing, aerodromes, you have, different sectors were looked at, air navigation service providers and all the rest of it. Nigeria scored above the average in the world in 5 different sectors, including airworthiness and operations, and organization, by the way. So, when you look at it from that standpoint, what is it the minister is seeing today that the ICAO auditors in September 2023 did not see? So, I feel it's not right to sweep the entire, or paint the entire industry one fell swoop of the brush to say that there might be some, the occasional, as it were, issues. But it's not to say that everything is bad. I mean, that's the issue we have. we're thinking that if the minister were to say this is a case, he is a minister. If he says we have a problem here, it is for him to identify the problem and deal with it. He should come to us and say, oh, by the way, we found this, we've done this. But coming to say that there is a problem, we will deal with it, doesn't tell me anything. So I think it is wrong for him to have come on national TV, to have, pretty much escalated what should never have been escalated. Okay, so an airline had an incident. We're not here to defend any airline. I mean, what the AON would represent is airlines having the best standards and practices in the world. Because we're looking to have our membership go out of Africa, go out of Nigeria and go out of Africa. So if we're saying that, we will be more concerned to ensure that whatever standards are applicable internationally is what's applicable locally. There are no double standards. So an airline has an incident. There are structures and systems in place in this ecosystem that defines how things get done. We have the NSIB. Their role is to investigate accidents. If in the course of their remit, they discover that this particular situation is an incident, different from an accident, then it is passed on to the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. So there are systems and structures in place. So an incident is defined as something that is less than $25,000 worth in terms of quantum for repairs, according to ICAO Annex 13. So if by virtue of what has happened in recent times, the NSIB defines or determines that the accident or incident is not really what it is, then it's given its appropriate name, and then the NCA is allowed to do whatever it has to do. I think the pronouncements of the minister was preemptive. I am not sure if we can get a fair investigation into the matter, because already the minister
is this
came
on the suspension.
Yes, that's correct. Okay. The minister said the Dana Air flight came in without the nose gear out. I would be very surprised if a pilot would come in to land an aircraft and he would see from his cockpit that his nose gear is not locked in position, because there's a light that will tell you that, right? And he doesn't call the airport emergency services to be on standby. Mm. So these are issues we think ordinarily, yes, the minister may have found some problems, but we do not think those problems are such that he needed to have made those sweeping statements he made.
Yeah, you're seeing it as a case of generalization from
Absolutely.
What I gather. Now, earlier on, where you touched on one of the major issues when it comes to taxes, you did say 17 taxes are applied to every flight, and airlines are basically collectors of government taxes.
That's
and
correct.
When you reduce taxes, the affordability of the industry becomes more possible.
Yes.
Based on the body language of this administration so far, are you optimistic that this challenge will be factored in and tackled in anytime soon?
Well, again, when this administration came on board and the ministers were appointed, the AON as a body approached the minister and presented him with a bouquet of options of things to be done, the different problems we have in the industry, and probable solutions, as it were. So we engaged him. It was an interactive session for well over 3 hours, and it came out well. It was positive, but unfortunately, we haven't seen pretty much most of the things we've talked about in 8 months now getting done. So it puts us, at that point where we're asking the question, will he ever get done? Because, in the list we had low-hanging fruits. The taxes were one of them. Currently, airlines are charged 5% of your ticket sales as a tax that is shared amongst certain agencies. What we have said is very simple. That tax was introduced about 4 decades ago when we had the Civil Aviation Department, not even a ministry, and there was not adequate funding at the time. We had barely 2 million passengers traveling in the country. So if you look at it then, vis-a-vis what we have now, if we go by the number of, by the statistic we got from the Bureau of Statistics recently, we're told that about 18 million passengers are traveling in the Nigerian, ecosystem. 75% of that domestic. So if we take that number and we look at what 5% represents, and then we know, given the information we have as well, that the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority alone, contributed about $500 million last year to the coffers of government. If you take it from a standpoint, and I want you to look at the establishment acts for each of the various agencies, it talks about the fact that they are not for profit. In line with the ICAO document 86332, which talks about the form of taxation you can have in aviation, and essentially whatever it is must be for cost recovery. On that basis, what is expected is that any amount that is charged in the system must be for recovery of services, rendered for that particular, operation. But as we speak, obviously, for the NCA to be able to remit about $500 million to the federal government and still not be bankrupt, it tells us that there's surplus monies in the system, and that negates, totally at variance with the presupposition or supposition that it's all for cost recovery. So what we're saying to government is we believe strongly, and there's empirical evidence to show that airlines are overtaxed. ICAO has said it, IATA has said it, that even within the African, space, Nigeria is the highest in terms of taxes. So if we really think there's a need to grow the system, get the benefit of the sector for the entire country, then there's a need to review all of those things. The new government has talked about easing business, removing taxes to ensure that sectors can grow, the economy can grow. Aviation is one sector that really requires that, because again, if you grow aviation, you will support sectors that are not even looked at this present time, like tourism. Mm-hmm. Tourism in Nigeria is not grown, and it is latent. There's growth potential in tourism. If you go to Accra, Ghana, just there, tourism is a huge contributor to the economy at this point in time. We should be doing a lot better than that. So what we are saying is, look, we're not campaigning for ourselves alone. We're looking at the bigger picture. We're saying, let us do the right things so we can grow this whole economy holistically, not just one sector, because the extractive industries are there, agriculture is there, tourism is there. These are all sectors that rely heavily on the aviation sector, oil and gas. So we're saying, look, government, look at the issues blighting the growth in this sector. Do something about this, and let's see what happens in terms of the ripple effects across the entire economy. That's essentially where we're headed.
Okay. Now, Captain Roland, while you do put forward a compelling case for the industry, I remember when the minister came in, he was very bullish about sanitizing things from an operational perspective, from a passenger experience perspective, which is something that, was welcomed by all. We all know the experience, often uncomfortable experience of domestic air travel. Now, my question is, who should we really be advocating for right now? Because as much as there's 18 million travelers in this ecosystem, these people largely do feel shortchanged most of the time. So is this a time for us to focus on the aviation sector from a business perspective and start eliciting empathy because the taxes are high? Or do we first need to clean up the service delivery, poor service delivery that passengers are receiving?
Thank you very much. Look, when we talk service delivery, it's a holistic thing. What the passengers know is that they have interactions directly with the airline. But believe it or not, most of what's required to ensure seamless consumer experience is actually in the remit of government provisioning. When you go to the airport, at the check-in counter, once you're checked in there, at that point, your relationship with the airline pretty much stops until you get on the aircraft.
If it shows up on time.
Well, between then, the check-in time and the boarding time, a lot of things happen. Typically, you have facilitation. Passengers go through the screening points, you get your baggage checked, and all the rest of it. You go into the lounge, and of course, you wait. Now, let me tell you the part of it that is a bit of a sort of bottleneck. Early in the mornings, the peak periods, The screening positions we have at most of our airports, particularly the big airports, are grossly inadequate to sort of address the passenger throughput capacity they installed for. In the GAT, for instance, in Lagos, you have one screening per term. I think it's one screening per point or two maximum if both are working. And then you have maybe about 10 flights in the morning, talking about over 1,000 passengers. And all those flights would depart between maybe 6:30 in the morning and 8 o'clock. Now, the bottleneck you have at the screening point can create a 30-minute delay for an airline departing Lagos in the morning. When that airline departs 30 minutes late in the morning, that 30 minutes becomes a ripple effect, and by the end of the day, you've got 3 hours. That's over 6 sectors. So when you look at it from that standpoint, it is actually disadvantaging the airline. Why? You are not able to optimize the use of your aircraft asset. All these aircraft are designed to operate for between 8 and 11 hours a day. In Nigeria, we're doing 6. So as a matter of fact, when you look at it from a production capacity point of view, Nigerian airlines are already, they disadvantage 50% of their production capacity on a daily basis. Now, we also have airports that are called sunset airports because by 6 o'clock, they shut down. Now, that is not the airline, that is government. And the reason is very simple. You need to have adequate manpower to man those airfields. Air traffic controllers, Aviation Security Corps, these are people that are not provided by the airlines, they're provided by government. I mean, recently the MD of the Nigerian Airspace Management came on and said they're short of air traffic controllers. What that means is that secondary airports that don't have enough passenger numbers are disadvantaged. They would focus the assets on the prime airports. So anybody going to any of these sunset airports that shuts down maybe about 6 p.m. means that if an airline has suffered a 3-hour delay during the day, chances are that flight will be cancelled. And if it is cancelled, it becomes a problem for the airline the following day because now they are forced to having to take these passengers very quickly to their destination early the next morning. But that problem is not the airline problem. That problem is government problem. So the thing is, infrastructure is fundamental. We have a deficit in our infrastructure. And until that is addressed, consumer experience will be lacking. But again, there's a need for proper awareness. Passengers need to understand some of those things that are happening. For instance, why do you have to, some passengers say, oh, we're sitting there and we didn't even hear when the announcement was made, we missed our flights. They've been checked in. Why do we not have flight information display systems at the airport? These are basic things that can make the consumer experience, like you're saying, a lot better, but we don't.
No, just as we round up with you, when it comes to regional integration and cooperation, of course, we know this is crucial for the aviation sector. How can Nigeria leverage its position and work with neighboring countries to enhance regional air connectivity and boost the overall aviation industry in West Africa?
Well, unfortunately, when you look at the region, really, the major carriers are based in Nigeria. And for that reason, most of the countries in the region actually have, pretty much, used a protectionist scheme for their markets because a lot of countries are a bit wary of having dominant carriers from different countries coming to take over their markets. So until that protectionism is taken out of the equation, it will be very difficult for any of the sort of benefits we're looking at to come to fruition. The essence of the single African air transport market is to remove all those sort of barriers. And hopefully, once that is put in place properly, and all the countries are sort of, they've come on board and they're willing to at least adhere by the provisions of the SATM, then maybe we'll now start seeing some improvement. But the key thing at this point is because a lot of countries in the region do not have strong airlines, they are protecting their markets from would-be dominant carriers. And that is something that needs to be overcome to start with before we start seeing the benefits of it.
All right. Very educative, very informative. Thank you so much for your time today, Captain Roland Iyayi, of course, Managing Director of Nigerian Airspace Management Agency. Former Managing Director.
Thank you very much.
This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.